you know the croissant, the ultimate symbol of French elegance that billions worship every morning, was actually born in Austria centuries before France turned it into a global icon? That shatteringly flaky masterpiece started as a simple, dense Viennese Kipferl in the 1200s, then got completely reinvented in Paris with legendary amounts of French butter and pure technical brilliance. France didn't just improve it. France stole the croissant in the most successful culinary glow-up in history, and made the entire world believe it was theirs from the start. But who was the Austrian mastermind that made it all possible? How did Paris pull off the switch? And why has Vienna never really fought for the credit? Get ready. Your next bakery run is about to feel extremely personal. Imagine this. You're standing on a narrow Paris street in the 6th arrondissement of Paris just before 7 in the morning. The metal shutter of the boulangerie rattles upward, and the smell that rolls out hits you like a drug. Warm butter, toasted flour, and something almost indecently seductive. The baker, still flour-dusted from the night shift that began at 2 a.m., slides a curved, burnished croissant onto a square of parchment. It's still ticking from the oven, the layers hissing softly as they cool. You tear it open, and the interior is a cathedral of honeycombs, each cell holding a tiny universe of steam and butter. You take a bite and, for one perfect second, you understand why people have started wars over less. This, you tell yourself, is France distilled into edible form. This is civilization. Except it isn't. That croissant you're worshipping is an Austrian in a beret who learned to speak perfect French, got extensive plastic surgery, and now refuses to acknowledge its own mother. Its real name is Kipferl. It grew up in Vienna eating vanilla sugar for breakfast, and it only moved to Paris because a retired artillery officer decided to commit the greatest culinary heist in history. And France didn't just adopt it. France kidnapped it, gave it a new passport, rewrote its childhood memories, and now threatens to fight anyone who mentions the truth. Welcome to the Food Prestige, where today we are officially canceling croissants. We are exposing the most successful case of gastronomic identity theft ever recorded. By the time this video ends, you will never look at a bakery display case the same way again. Some of you will become Team Austria forever. Others will double down on Team France and pretend none of this ever happened. Either way, hit subscribe right now, because this is the food history video that France doesn't want you to see. The year is 1683. The grateful bakers create a pastry shaped like the crescent moon on the Turkish flag. They call it the Hornchen, little horn. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is supposedly how the croissant was born. We have actual bakery guild records from Austria going back to the 13th century. Yes, the 1200s, that list crescent-shaped pastries called Monzikel, or Lohnbrötchen, being delivered to convents and noble houses. There are invoices from the 1300s for almond-filled, poppy seed-filled, and hazelnut-filled crescents. There is a recipe from a Corinthian monastery dated 1487 that is recognizably a butter-laminated Kipferl. The famous siege story first appears in print only in the 1840s, right when French bakers needed a sexy origin myth to sell more pastries to tourists. It is the culinary equivalent of George Washington and the cherry tree. It is adorable. It is inspiring. It is complete and utter fan fiction. We're talking pre-Roman ancient. The Greeks baked honey-drizzled crescent pastries called cholera as offerings to Artemis, goddess of the hunt and the moon. Archaeologists have found crescent-shaped bread molds in Pompeii. The Byzantines had sesame-crusted crescents called koulouri that are still sold on every street corner in Istanbul today. By the High Middle Ages, the Kipferl was absolutely everywhere in the Holy Roman Empire and the Habsburg lands. It came in dozens of varieties, dense and brioche-like, sometimes boiled, then baked like a bagel, filled with nuts, dipped in chocolate, scented with vanilla, lemon zest, or cinnamon. There is a surviving recipe from a nun in Klosterneuburg, written around 1680, 3 years before the famous siege, that explicitly says, "Take good butter, fold the dough thrice, and shape into little horns." That, my friends, is lamination. In 1680, the bakers of Vienna did not invent the shape to celebrate a victory. They simply took an ancient, widespread pastry that already existed and rebranded it after the victory. Absolute marketing geniuses. Fast forward now to 1770, a 14-year-old Austrian archduchess named Marie Antoinette is sent to France to marry the future Louis XVI. She is homesick, culture-shocked, and surrounded by French food she finds boring. The internet loves to claim she demanded croissants and that her Austrian bakers smuggled the recipe across the border. This is half true and entirely misleading. Marie Antoinette did indeed bring Austrian pastry chefs with her. She did popularize Viennese fashions in pastry. There was a Viennese bakery near the Palais Royal that served only Austrian specialties to the aristocracy. But the pastries she ate were dense, brioche-style Kipferl made with lard or low-butter dough. They were good. They were not the ethereally flaky, 81-layer honeycomb interior miracles we know today. Marie Antoinette was guillotined in 1793 and never once tasted a modern French croissant in her entire life. She gets credit as the hype woman who made à la Viennoise fashionable. She gets zero credit for invention. The real criminal mastermind arrives 68 years after her death. His name is August Zang. He is 28 years old, and he is a retired Austrian artillery officer with cheekbones sharp enough to slice dough. In 1838, he opens the Boulangerie Viennoise at 92 Rue de Richelieu in Paris, right in the heart of the most fashionable district. Zang brings two weapons France has never seen before. First, he installs the very first steam oven in France, a massive coal-fired monster imported from Vienna that bakes bread with a crackling crust and an impossibly white crumb. French bread at the time is heavy, grayish, and baked in wood-fired ovens that give inconsistent results. Zang's bread comes out looking like it was designed by angels. Parisians lose their minds. Second, he introduces his version of the Kipferl. Taller, shinier, more heavily laminated than anything France has ever produced. Contemporary accounts describe them as Austrian miracles that melt in the mouth like snow in the sun. By 1839, the line is around the block every morning. Le Figaro writes breathless articles. Honoré de Balzac mentions the bakery in his novels. Even royalty waits in line. French bakers immediately start copying the recipe like mad, but they can't call it Kipferl, too Austrian, so they rename it Croissant, the French word for crescent. The entire category we now call viennoiserie is literally invented in the 1840s to describe the flood of rich, laminated, sweet Austrian pastries that suddenly dominate Paris. Pain au chocolat? Invented in Paris using leftover croissant dough. Pain au raisin? Same story. Brioche feuilletée? Same. The whole family tree of modern French breakfast pastries explodes out of one Austrian officer's bakery. Zang makes an absolute fortune, sells the place in 1846, returns to Vienna, and founds Die Presse, still one of Austria's biggest newspapers today. The man gave us both the modern croissant and modern journalism. Absolute legend. But here is where the story takes its most delicious twist. France does not remain a copycat for long. Between 1850 and 1900, French bakers take Zang's already excellent Kipferl and subject it to the gastronomic equivalent of a glow-up so extreme it should have its own reality show. First, they switch completely to 100% fresh, cultured French butter. Isigny, Échiré, Charente-Poitou. Butters so good they have their own AOC designations. Austrian bakers were still sometimes using lard or lower butter blends for cost reasons. The French go all butter, no compromises. Second, they refine the lamination technique to an almost religious degree. Where Austrian Kipferl might have had 3 or 4 turns, French bakers develop 6, 7, even 9 turns, creating 81 or even 243 layers if they're feeling psychotic. They chill the butter block to exactly the right temperature, roll on marble slabs, and guard their recipes like nuclear codes. Third, and this is the true stroke of genius, sometime in the 1860s-70s, they begin adding a tiny amount of yeast to the détrempe, the base dough, creating what the French call pâte levée feuilletée, yeasted puff pastry. This small change produces the signature honeycomb interior that makes a perfect croissant look like alien architecture when you tear it open. By the 1890s, the French croissant is visibly, dramatically different from anything being made in Vienna. Taller, shinier, more open-crumbed, more fragile, more buttery, more everything. Then, between 1905 and 1915, the final canonical recipe appears in cookbooks. Sylvain Claudius Goy, Apollon Kaler, and others published nearly identical formulas that are still used today. 500 green flour, 10 green salt, 50-80 green sugar, 10-20 green yeast, 250-280 ml cold milk or water, and a full 250-300 green of the finest tirage butter for the lamination, 3 bookfolds or 4 single folds, proof until almost doubled. Egg wash. Bake hot and fast at 210-220 degrees until the color of mahogany. Austria gave the world the shape and the original idea. France took that idea, put it in a particle accelerator of technique and butter, and shot it into the stratosphere. Now let's talk about the straight versus curved civil war that still rages in France today. All of Auguste Zang's original croissants were curved. For almost a century, every croissant in France is curved. Then, in the 1970s, industrial producers began mass-producing frozen croissants using margarine or mixed fats because butter is expensive and margarine has longer shelf life. The pastries are cheaper, more uniform, and can be shipped nationwide. Artisanal bakers are furious. They begin deliberately making their 100% beurre croissants straight as a badge of purity and rebellion. By the 1980s, the code is set in stone. Straight, chakchurs, all butter, artisanal, expensive, proud. Curved, chakka, maybe butter, maybe not, probably industrial. There is no law, despite what TikTok tells you, but the tradition is stronger than law. Walk into any serious boulangerie in France today, and the straight ones cost 0.30 avroban, so 70 more than the curved ones for a reason. Meanwhile, if you go to Vienna today and confidently order un croissant, you will be handed something that looks like a sad dinner roll having an identity crisis. The real Austrian pastry is still called Kipferl, or, in the plush hotels, viennoiserie, and it is delicious in its own dense, nutty, vanilla-scented way. But it is not trying to be French, and it never was. France didn't adopt the croissant. France performed a hostile takeover, rewrote its DNA, and now gaslights the entire world into believing it was French all along. And the wildest part? Every great French pastry chef knows the truth. Ask anyone at Le Nôtre, La Durée, Pierre Hermé, Du Pain et des Idées, they will all trace their lineage straight back to Auguste Zang without hesitation. They just don't care. Because France didn't just make it better, France made it perfect. Let's go deeper into the modern era, because the croissant wars of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. In the 1980s and 1990s, industrial frozen pre-proofed croissants flood the market. By 2008-2010, studies show that more than 70–80% of the croissants sold in France are industrially produced and finished in shop. The scandal is enormous. Television documentaries are made. People are in the streets. The French government eventually creates the label boulanger instead of déposeur de pâte surgelée that allows real artisans to display a gold sign declaring they bake everything from scratch on premises. Croissant prices become a political football. In 2022-2023, when butter prices double because of the Ukraine war, the price of a single Parisian croissant breaks 180 in some neighborhoods, and people genuinely lose their minds. Then the freaks arrive. First came Dominique Ansel's Cronut in New York in 2013. Croissant donut hybrid, trademarked, 3-hour lines, scalpers on Craigslist. Then the Cruffin, croissant muffin. Then the croissant cone, cubed croissants in Japan, cereal crusted in Los Angeles. In 2021-2023, the supreme croissant, invented by Moroccan-French baker Anas Atassi at his shop Liberté in Paris, a rolled, laminated, custard-filled monster that sells out in 7 minutes flat and crashes the bakery's Instagram every morning. In 2024, Dubai pistachio chocolate-filled croissants become a global virus. In 2025, we have the croissant céréale trending in Seoul, twice-baked croissant dough coated in cinnamon sugar like American monkey bread, and the croissant roll in Tokyo filled with matcha creme diplomat and hojicha ganache. The croissant has officially left mere pastry territory and entered its full chaotic, postmodern, hyperviral era. And globally, The United States produces croissants the size of a baby's arm, often sweet, sometimes stuffed with ham and cheese for breakfast sandwiches that would make a Parisian weep. Japan produces croissants so geometrically perfect they look generated by AI, with lamination so fine you can read a newspaper through the layers. South Korea stuffs them with garlic butter, bulgogi, or gochujang cream cheese. Mexico makes them with cajeta and churro sugar. Lebanon makes them giant and filled with za'atar and cheese. The Kipferl went viral, colonized the planet, and now speaks every language except its mother tongue. So here we are in 2025, a pastry that began as a humble, dense, medieval Austrian breakfast cookie in the 13th century got a patriotic marketing makeover, maybe, in 1683, crossed the border disguised as a diplomatic gift in 1770, received a complete technical overhaul by a retired artillery officer in 1838, was refined into perfection by generations of obsessive French bakers, survived 2 world wars and butter rationing, fought off industrial margarine invaders, and is now the single most recognizable symbol of French elegance on earth. Worn as a badge by luxury brands, photographed by influencers, and eaten by literally billions of people who have no idea they're consuming the most successful Austrian con artist in culinary history. Comment right now, no nuance allowed, Team Austria or Team France. Would you rather have an honest, nutty, 14th century almond Kipferl with your morning coffee, or a $12 Pierre Hermé Ispahan croissant filled with rose, raspberry, and lychee that makes you speak in tongues? Be honest. And if this video just detonated your entire worldview about breakfast pastries, smash the like button so hard it breaks, subscribe, turn on notifications, and tell me in the comments which sacred food origin story I should annihilate next. The baguette? Macaron, escargot, tiramisu, creme brulee? I have receipts for all of them. This is the Food Prestige, signing off with one final truth. Every time you bite into a perfect croissant and feel those buttery shards explode across your tongue, somewhere in Vienna an old Kipferl is smiling quietly, knowing the long con worked perfectly. Now go eat one. And when it shatters in your mouth like edible stained glass, whisper, very softly, Dankeschön. Because deep down you know who really won.